Aloha, my name is Sarah Taylor Coe. I'm an artist on the Big Island in Keau, and I want to thank Viewpoints Gallery in Makawao, Maui, who inspired this body of work for their Reaching Art shows in which an artist engages the community with their art. I invited Lisa Mason, who is a graduate student at the University of Hilo, Hawaii, to collaborate with me. She's studying the vocalizations of the palila and small yellow and gray honey creeper that's endemic to Hawaii from when they were first recorded in the 1970s until the present. She connected me with field notes, hand-drawn maps, and spectrograms to collage into my work. But even more importantly, Lisa offered insight into Hawaiian culture with the Welcome Oli I Homai, the concept of Makawalu, and the worldview that is Malama Aina. All of these words, they imply reciprocity rather than the Western worldview where people are a force outside nature and our main purpose is more connected to consumption. These ideas assert that we're in nature's family and our place is in relationship to all the creatures in the land around us. I recognize this as a metaphor in my work as I approach it as a dialogue. I talk to my subject matter and materials, and they talk back and inform me what steps to take next. It's a conversation that later expands as the viewer makes their own connections and relationships to the work. The Palila project was created around the idea of Makawalu. In Olelo, Hawaii, Maka means I and Walu means 8. The word has a connotation of abundance of perspectives. I found it intriguing that while we count the 10 digits of our hands, the Hawaiians looked at the spaces in between their fingers, and in the empty spaces they saw abundance. For them, 8 is a number of completeness. The 8 spaces in your fingers could hold 8 fishtails, or they could hold 8 taro plants. So I found it really fascinating to see the possibility in emptiness, and I thought that was a great expression of resilience. So in addition to a multitude of perspectives, Makawalu implies infinite resources. Maintaining an abundance mindset when approaching such a critically endangered bird seemed appropriate. There are between 500 and 1,500 individual palilas left in the world, all of them on the Big Island of Hawaii. So of course, using Makawalu, I wanted to have 8 parts of this project. I ended up with 3 different painting series. I invited poetry fellow Ada Ko, who is a student at the Ohio State University, to write some poems around the palila. Big Island photographer Alex Wong supplied a reference photo of a palila for a mural project that I did with Christian Liberty 11th grade students. Lisa Mason's research played into it, and there's also a 3D project with clay eggs, and people from around the country, around the world even, sent me clay eggs, and I used a branch that was in the Palila Trail to make a little sculpture. So the paintings behind me are one aspect of this project, and you'll notice that of course there are 8 paintings. For this body of work, I was particularly inspired by the idea of maps because the restoration of a very specific elevation and area of land is vital to the preservation of the palila. Cartographers usually, they draw using a perspective of a high vantage point, and it's like the bird's eye view. So I wanted to emulate that in these paintings. And maps also connect me to a certain fluidity with time, since they're drawn by people with intimate knowledge of a place and used by later generations. So my Palila series functions as a map, not to a destination, but to a beautiful, rare, vanishing corner of the Palila's world. They are like treasure maps in which the viewer participates by finding a hidden Palila or a mamane plant on which the palila depend. An important component to this project was sharing it with the younger people in my community, so I devised a mural project, and I created a mural with Rachel Reimel's 11th grade class at Christian Liberty Academy. It was during COVID, so we had to be a little creative. I made a packet for each student with a 12 by 12 inch wood panel, a set of brushes, and an individual set of primary colored paint in white and black, and a little makeshift palette with paper towels and tracing paper. So each student received one of those, and some of the students were at home, some in the classroom. I wasn't allowed in the classroom because of COVID regulations, but we worked around that with Google Classroom, and we did 2 sessions of painting together. I taught them how to mix secondary colors from primary colors, so all the oranges and greens and purples that you see and all the grays in this mural were all painted by them. I needed a reference photo to do the mural project, and Alex Wong, who's a Big Island photographer, very graciously allowed us to use a photograph of his of the female Palila in a mamane tree. The final mural, what I most love about it is each individual student's style and hand shows through, but together it makes a really striking mural that's a great tribute to the Palila. Plus, it was a lot of fun. When Ada was preparing to write her poems for the Palila project, she was listening to the sound recordings from Lisa, and she made her own system of notations for the different syllable counts that she later translated into words for her poems. I thought they were so visually interesting. They looked a little tribal, and they reminded me of the Hawaiian kapa, and also of the Palila song itself, which is a little bright and shrill. So visually I thought they were interesting, and I included them in this painting. They show up as the V's and the lines in the background. I also included Ada's poem itself. Her sonnet fades in and out in the background. I'm not sure that the camera picks it up, but there's very subtle marks also of maps that I drew in the background. And the painting itself, I was really surprised when I saw the mamane and the Palila in person at how very small they are. The mamane flowers are maybe a ½ inch or inch big, and the pods are maybe 3 inches long. So they're very small, and I wanted to create an epic and grand scale to showcase the Palila, and that's this painting. One of my favorite experiences of the Palila project was the opportunity that I had to visit Palila Trail. It's a public park opened on Mauna Kea, and Lisa took Ada and myself there. Before we entered the trail, we took off all of our headgear and we faced the mountain, and Lisa sang an oli, Iko Mai, which is asking for permission to enter the land, and as you would a family member's house, knocking on the door before you come in, and also asking for wisdom from the plants and the animals that live there. It was a beautiful place, high up in the mountains and very dry, and then later in the afternoon the mist came in, so it was kind of magical. I wanted to create some paintings based on the feel of that, and also I wanted to incorporate more of Ada's poems into some artwork. So Lisa's research seems to indicate that as the Palila's population declines, there's also a decline in the variation and amount of vocalizations. So that's where these 2 paintings also came from. One painting, the painting on the left, is more tight grid structure and more complex, and the painting on the right is less so. So as I worked on these paintings, I was incorporating sketches from Palila Trail, the kind of colors and feel of the trail, and the research of Lisa's.
I've always been interested in the forest and birds. I started learning about bird calls and bioacoustics when I was an undergraduate student at UH Hilo. So when I go out into the field, I collect hand recordings of the birds. So this is my Sony recorder, and then I have a directional microphone that I use, and so if I hear something interesting, I'll put my headphones on, then I'll just point it where I want to record and try to stay as quiet as I can. So sometimes when the Palila are foraging. They'll forage in small flocks, and they'll find trees with a lot of food on it, and they'll keep going back to those trees. And so they've become known as restaurant trees. You'll have a bunch of feeding Palila, and you can recognize a restaurant tree because when you look down on the ground, you'll see all the discarded pods and flower petals that they've pulled off the flowers. And yeah,
Cute.
this could be one.
I actually felt like my artwork was really suited for this project because I love collage and I love mixed media, and I like to be able to incorporate really different things like realistic elements and abstract elements and like line and shape that are really different. And Lisa just provided me with this treasure trove of old maps and field notes and just the recordings of the bird songs. And so as I started putting them together, what was so interesting to me was visually there's this correlation between like the mountains and the bird songs, and then there's also like visual overlap with like the bird territory and the song itself. So I just thought that was interesting. It was something I would have never realized without putting these things together. And I was just trying to have sort of like a lighthearted, I used the colors of the Palila, the yellows and the grays, and I tried to incorporate the food that they eat, the mamane, and incorporate a sense of time. I know your project has to do with bird songs through time, and that's another way that my work is suited to it because I work in so many layers and layers of paint and collage, and I kind of make the papers, I glaze them and I scrape them and sand them, and it gives you this feeling of time passing. So it has this like aged look in parts of the paintings, and I wanted that because I wanted to have the idea that this isn't just like a thing right now, but it's connected to the past and connected to the future, and that sense of time. How do you show that visually? Well, one of the ways has to do with the sort of layers and transparencies that are going on in my work. So yeah, it's really been a privilege to learn more about the Palila and more about their territory. I was surprised being here how different it looks, than what I imagined from the pictures I could find online. So I really hope to take this, and I have one last painting, a big painting that I'm working on, and I hope to be able to take what I've seen today and enrich that work with what I've seen. So thank you.